got it. Candy? No, thank you. No? Mrs. Wilson? Okay. Nick Carraway.
Oh, a pleasure.
Nick's the writer.
Oh.
Oh, I'm in Bonds, actually.
I want you get on the next train.
Now?
Yes.
Can we get the dog for the apartment?
Whatever you want.
Mr. Cannon, you want a soda?
I'm fine.
No?
Call your sister if you like.
No. That's all right, thank you.
Catherine's said to be very good looking by people who ought to know.
Oh, really, I can't.
Hey, you want to embarrass Myrtle?
Okay, hello everybody. So if we can just grab our Great Gatsby out, I don't know. Okay. So we're going to go through the answers for Great Gatsby for chapters 2. To start off with, I did actually ask you to complete the theme information now that you would have read the whole of chapter 1. So it'd be interesting to see. I'm sure many of you have picked different themes. It says choose 2 and write sentences that show certain themes of the book. So when I was looking at it in terms of dreams, as you can see here, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning again with the summer. I think in terms of dreams, at the beginning of the book, the focus is more on Nick Carraway and what his dreams are and his aspirations for himself, but I'm sure you've probably got some different ideas as well. Wealth, when he said East Egg glittered, when you really think about it, houses probably don't glitter, but it's the concept of that wealth, of that money. So I thought that was a relevant quote. And for possession, my interpretation of The Great Gatsby, I see a lot of possession in terms of Tom over Daisy, but also Tom over pretty much everybody. So for instance, at one point he said Nick says, he rested his hand on my shoulder, and he's tend to stand up, or he moves him around like he's a piece from a chessboard. So that's kind of a possessive type thing. But also he interrupts Daisy very, very often, which is another form of possession. You're not allowed to have your ideas. So those are the areas that I saw, but you've probably come up with your own. And so long as you can find evidence within the literature, I'm sure that they're completely suitable. So moving on to, from the text, choose 5 words that reflect the Valley of Ashes. Obviously you can't pick Valley or Ashes. Okay, so within the first 2 pages, you actually get so many different options. I'm going to read through the ones that I found, tick them off if you've found similar ones. I've not used just one word. I have put 2 words together because I do think that often when he's describing, he does like to use some different sort of groups of words. For instance, fantastic farm. Now, when he talks about fantastic doesn't mean different or good all the time. Fantastic is something fantasy, something bizarre. Desolate area. Grotesque gardens, rising smoke, bleak, ghastly, foul river, dim, and powdery air. So you don't imagine it's going to be the most beautiful place in the world. Certainly a huge contrast to both West Egg and East Egg when you think of them. What are the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg? I think it's down here, actually. Here we go. So he talks about the eyes of T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face but, instead, from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose. So we know that this is not an actual person. In fact, what he's looking at is basically a billboard. So they're blue and gigantic. I get the sense that they're quite brooding. It was originally an ad painting, but he says it's kind of, obviously it's not been fixed up, so but his eyes dimmed a little by many paintless days under sun and rain brood on over the solemn dumping ground. It's kind of like maybe he's quite ominous, someone that is looking down upon me. I think it represents a bit of a god or a judgment down on on this particular area. But again, it's literature, so you can interpret it different ways and be interesting to read through your answers. Who does Nick meet that he really doesn't want to? And it's actually Tom's mistress, Myrtle Wilson. He didn't want anything to do with it. Obviously, he's Daisy's cousin. And I think from a moral perspective, he doesn't really agree with this behaviour. Who is the mistress's husband? Now, again, it does ask you to use complete sentences when you complete these questions. In this case, Myrtle's husband is Mr. Wilson, and he's a mechanic who sells cars. He's kind of sad, used, seems a bit washed out, a little bit needy as well. What object does Myrtle want? And she wants a dog, a police dog. She goes on about it. She doesn't seem like the smartest little chicken, but very much a bit more of a seductress. What happens to Nick for the second time in his life, and why is it important? So he says that he got drunk, and so when he was observing and experiencing this whole party, it was kind of hazy, as if he's looking at it through a dream. And I think that has an impact. My perspective is I think it has an impact on how he reacts to it, because it takes him out of it, and again removes that moral aspect. So his behaviour is maybe not what it would be in a sober situation. He does seem a little bit repulsed by the entitled and overindulgent behaviour. Then we've got describe Myrtle's sister, and having a look at, let me just write sister, go to that page. Okay. So sister, she says that she's beautiful, slender, worldly. Now, worldly is not in this era a very nice thing to call a girl. It does imply that maybe she's enjoyed the company of men. Blurred air to her face. She's being plucked and prodded. She's got lots of jewellery on. It's a vast contrast to when you think about what Daisy is like, and the way he describes Daisy. So again, you've got to remember that Nick is observing these people and he's describing them to us, so we can kind of get a bit of judgment about these people. What does Myrtle say about Daisy? She actually repeats her name and says that she can talk about whoever she wants when she wants to. She also comments that she's a Catholic, and that is why Tom has not divorced her yet. So Tom's clearly making, he wants to eat his cake and have it too. So he's making sort of reasons to Myrtle as to why he can't just be with her. What derogatory term? So term is a derogatory term is someone put someone down. Mrs. McKee used to describe the man she almost married. She used the word kike. The word kike actually means a Jewish person. It's something that you definitely should not repeat. It's a just horrifying word. And it means, she also kind of implies that he was below her. And you've got to remember, this is also pre-World War II. So during that time, there was an increase of racism toward Jewish people, as we sort of saw, it was definitely highlighted. And also the concept of eugenics, breeding people out or breeding out things. So it was happening very much in America, as well as Germany at that time. So you can see that there's a bit of a cultural and historical dynamic happening here. Although not explicitly stated in the text, why might Myrtle prefer Tom over her husband? And again, you need to look at the subtext. So for me, I think that she was actually seeking a life beyond her own. She wanted money, she wanted extravagance. Yeah, I think that's probably why she was. And Tom's this big, strong, Bolshevik type male, whereas you've got her husband who has clearly had some financial issues and seems very, very worn out. So she probably finds that somewhat abhorrent. and considers that weak, whereas Tom is, the complete opposite to her husband. What does Tom do to Myrtle after she mentions Daisy's name, and is he justified? And he slaps her. Now, justification, different time. At that time, it was relatively okay to kind of slap your wife or the lady friend. I personally think no, it's not justified, because I don't think abuse is ever justified, but it depends on your personal interpretation of that text. And I think you could very easily argue both for and against that particular part, so long as you've got evidence to back yourself up. And again, although it's never stated, how did Nick feel about Tom's actions? I think because he was inebriated, we don't get what I think he would normally be shocked by it. I think the whole thing was very bizarre to him, but his response didn't really show a lot in terms of being upset or angered by it. So it's interesting to see that he's kind of questioning his own morals and his own perspectives at this time. So what you guys are going to be doing next is we're going to move on to chapter 3. I'll get these the question sheets out to you for chapter 3. As usual, just spend the rest of this class having a read through and answering the questions, and I will see you next time.